Hey there, in today's video, I'm going to be answering the question of should you use a collar or a harness? Before I get started in today's video discussing the collar versus the harness, I want to give you a free gift. That free gift is my free 11-day dog relationship challenge. In it, you're given a daily activity to do with your dog. Each of these activities is specifically geared towards building and developing the relationship that you and your dog share with one another. By the end of the 11-day challenge, you'll have 11 different activities that you can do with your dog. You can get this 11-day challenge by clicking the link in the description below, or you can type it in as it appears across the screen here. That being said, let's get into the difference between the collar or the harness. Now, before we get started and explain the difference between the collar and the harness, I do want to firstly state that there's multiple different types of collars and also multiple different types of harnesses. Now, I will probably make another video explaining the different types of collars and harnesses and the pros and cons of each. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to be doing a generalization of collars versus harnesses and which one is better and for what reasons. To start with, we're going to go look at the collar. Right here, I simply have a flat collar with a buckle and a loop to attach it to. Now, the collar has many different pros to it. The benefits of the collar is that it allows you to have more leverage and control over the dog. By having the collar attached to the dog's neck and having the leash attached to the collar, you are able to manipulate and move the dog around much more easily than if the dog were on a harness. This allows you to gain more control over the dog in a variety of settings. Another benefit of having a collar on the dog is that it allows you to give tactile directional commands. Tactile directional commands is when you take the collar and you pull it in a certain direction, and the dog will give in to that pull. The collar is very useful for doing this, and you can easily guide them in one direction or another, such as lifting their collar up to get them to sit, or pulling their collar down to get them to lay down. This is very basic and very foundational for any type of obedience work you're going to do with the dog. Hence why I think if you're going to do obedience or want overall control with the dog, you really should be using a collar. That being said, there are cons of collars. Now, one of the most significant cons of using a collar is that if a dog does pull hard into it, they can choke themselves. This can, for smaller breeds, be very dangerous as it can actually crush their trachea. Now, we never want to encourage your dog to pull on a collar, whether it be a flat collar, a martingale collar, or any of the various types of collars. That being said, we want to train the dog to not pull on a collar. Now, this goes into the use of the harness. If we want a dog to pull, we want to use a harness. That is one of the pros of a harness. Pros of a harness is it allows the dog to pull safely without causing damage to their trachea or neck. This is useful for if you're taking a dog out and you do some kind of work where you want them to pull you along, whether it be on a bike, on a skateboard, on rollerblades, and you want your dog to pull you along as if they're a sled dog. That is, after all, the invention of the harness was used for sled dogs to pull people, sleds, and equipment. Now, the other benefit of the harness is the ability to put patches on that harness. These patches could be things such as service dog patches, a do not pet or ask to pet patches, or just motivational patches that you want to have on your dog's vest. Now, the disadvantages of utilizing a harness are, as I stated, a harness is designed to allow the dog to pull. Now, if you're taking your dog out for a walk and you have them on a harness, and you constantly ask yourself, why is my dog pulling so much? Well, it's probably because they're on a harness. And the design of the harness is meant to allow the dog to pull safely. And if you're wondering why they're pulling, it's probably because of the harness. Another disadvantage and con of having a harness is that in some instances it can cause leash reactivity. It causes leash reactivity in one of two ways. The first way is if a dog becomes frustrated because they want to get to another dog or person. They are restricted by the harness. That restriction creates a lot of frustration in the dog, and they start to react by barking, snapping, growling, the whole 9 yards. The other reason in which a harness can actually contribute and make reactivity of the dog worse is in the case of fear reactivity. The harness, because of all the contact points it has on the dog, and when the leash is held tight on the harness, is going to make the dog feel more restricted. They're not going to feel like they can escape. So if a dog displays fear reactivity and they see something that's threatening and they're in a harness and they feel like they're trapped, it's going to push them into that fight response, as the harness and the tight leash has taken away their ability to flee from that threatening individual or other dog. So the harness, while it is useful for letting a dog pull when we want them to pull and allowing them to do that behavior, it can be very detrimental when it comes to leash reactivity. Now, all in all, between the collar and the harness, there's a right time and place for each one of these tools. I use both in my dog training. I use primarily when it comes to teaching behaviors, obedience, and that kind of stuff, I will utilize a collar. But at times, if I'm trying to teach a dog to pull, in cases where I want them to pull, or if I have service dogs where I want to have patches on them to let the public know, hey, this is a service dog. Stay away from them, they're working, don't pet them, or if you do pet them, ask to pet them. I will use a harness as well as a collar. So in conclusion of this video, having a collar and a harness isn't so much a this versus that. In fact, I think any good individual who's training a dog should have elements of both in their daily training regimen. But you do have to know which one to use and in which situation. So I hope this video helped you out in deciding which one you should use and in what situations you should use them in. Until next time, see you. I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more great content like this in the future, make sure to go ahead and subscribe to the channel.